Good afternoon and welcome to the next session of the 2022 Family Business Summit with me, Paul Andrews, and my guest this afternoon, Dr. Marta Widz. Marta, good afternoon.
Good evening. In fact, I am based in Singapore, so it's 11 p.m. here, but good afternoon to everybody who is listening from Europe, and good morning to everybody who is listening from the US.
Fantastic. Marta,
thank you for inviting me.
Sorry, so good evening to you and welcome to the show. Can I get you just to start by just introducing yourself and the work that you do with the family business community?
Sure. So I actually wear three hats at the moment. I am a researcher at WMI, which is the Wealth Management Institute in Singapore. We work predominantly with family offices in here. And I'm also executive in residence at INSEAD, where I predominantly tackle on broader family business topics. And I'm also affiliated faculty at the University of Vermont, where I'm engaged in subjects that has something to do with sustainability and family businesses.
So a very diverse portfolio and a very diverse audience around the world too. So I'm really interested this afternoon to hear your thoughts and talk us through some of the things that actually families might think about when they want to list on a stock exchange. I know we're going to hear from a couple of case studies and some of the advantages and disadvantages. So fascinating concept, and I look forward to some words of wisdom from you this afternoon.
Absolutely. I mean, publicly listed family-controlled companies isn't a paradox when you think about family-controlled businesses and publicly listed businesses. It seems like these are the seemingly contradictory qualities, but in fact, they are not. And publicly listed family-controlled companies are not that rare. They are not very rare phenomena. Just to give you a couple of examples from the US, the Columbia, the Ford, the Kelly Services, Hyatt, Campbell Soup, Wiley, the publisher that we know very well from the academic world. They are all publicly listed family-controlled companies. And I just picked a couple of them that are that we may be familiar with because they are in business to customer model. Generally, there are about 30 to 40% of family companies on every stock exchange. So these are not really a rare phenomena. Now the question is it a threat or an opportunity to be listed? And I know quite many entrepreneurs and family business owners who would be really averse or very, very cautious of being listed because they are afraid of losing their control over the company and also of giving the company a strategic direction. They are also a little bit cautious or afraid of being told what they have to do by young 26 years old financial analysts who actually have to deliver their quarterly results. So again, there is a little bit of contradiction of the very long-term generational thinking of family businesses and those quarterly results that the stock looks at. But actually, there are quite many examples of family businesses that went public and stayed public, but there are also a couple of examples of family businesses that went public and then they actually became private again. One example from your market, and I just couldn't help bringing that example, knowing that you are sitting in the UK. You see that beautiful photo. There are three generations, family members there on the pictures. There is Berko and Minnie Rubin, Jewish immigrants from Russia and Poland who embark on ships and came to Liverpool in 1930s, and from that migrant background with very humble £500 capital raise from family and friends, they actually opened a shoe retail business, Liverpool Shoe Company. And then 3 decades later, so after being retailers, 3 decades later, they decided to expand into manufacturing. And for that, they needed capital. And that's why they went public. They listed their stock on the London Stock Exchange in 1964. And for another 3.5 decades, they actually were listed. But In the meantime, the second generation family member, the one who stands here in the middle, Stephen Rubin, the family entrepreneur, he actually struck a couple of wonderful deals, including buying some stocks in Reebok and then selling it at 10,000 multiple. So the family experienced an enormous liquidity event, and actually they decided to invest that money in the first place into becoming fully private again. So at that time, 36% of all the shares were listed still on the London Stock Exchange, and the family bought it at a very favorable price to let's say, public shareholders. And right now, the ownership is only in the hands of 6 family shareholders. And you see Andy Rubin, who used to be the last family CEO of Pentland Brands, because this is what we are talking about, the Pentland Group that has wonderful brands in its portfolio, fashion and sports brands such as Speedo, Canterbury of New Zealand, Maitri, Kickers, and some others. Now, interestingly, just to finish that small example, or well, a large example, but short in terms of the time I'm devoting in my presentation, is that many of the, let's say, procedures Pentland learned while being listed, they have kept it. So they still publish annual report. It's not really listed on it's not available on the web page, but if you go to the main office and required to see it, you will be given it. They still have a very nice board, which has also external independent directors. And they actually say that there are still advantages of some of the regulations that are brought by the stock exchange, and they keep it even though they prefer to be private.
It's a fantastic business, and Andy's actually headlined our national conference for us. It's a great story, and listening to him speak, he's a great ambassador for the family business sector too. So yeah, it's a great example of, as you say, a family business that's used the stock exchange to raise funds, to expand and to grow, and then taking it back private down the road. So lots of plus points, and then it's a great business to follow, and it's a great ambassador for the sector too.
I'm glad to hear that. I share your opinion fully, and interesting, this is not the only example. There are also a couple of other examples of companies I have worked with from German-speaking part of the world that they went public and then they kind of did the reverse listing. So again, this doesn't happen that rarely as one might think. But let's go to the main part of my presentation today. I would like to present you a case of an American company, American family business that went public and stayed public. And then I will take you to Israel to talk about the family business index. So,
fantastic.
Brown-Forman. We are talking about Brown-Forman. It is a company who is proud to be a publicly traded, family-controlled company with an engaged family stockholder base. But who is Brown-Forman? Who is the Brown family behind it? Well, Brown-Forman Corporation is a very old family business. They were founded in 1870. So 2 years ago, they celebrated 150th anniversary. It is headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky, and they still live a very strong Southern values. Interestingly enough, the headquarters is on the Whiskey Row, which already gives you a little bit of the information which business they are in. Yes, they are in spirits, and they started in bourbon, in whiskey. Very innovative company from the very beginning. So as I was told, that time in 19th century, whiskey would be just sold kind of or produced in barrels, and it would be sold by pouring the whiskey to your own bottle. So you will bring your own bottle and then you will buy it this way. But that meant also that even if you would buy from the same distillery, one bottle of a whiskey from one barrel may taste a little bit differently compared to another bottle bought from another barrel sometime later. So they were actually really pioneering selling the whiskey, the bourbon, in bottles. something which is so obvious for us right now wasn't obvious at all, but that was the way for them to ensure the quality of the product continuously throughout years and barrels. From a legacy bottled whiskey called Old Forester, the company expanded its portfolio to over 30 premium brands, including the American iconic whiskey brand Jack Daniels. They also have super premium bourbon in its portfolio, but also other alcoholic beverages like wine or Finlandia vodka. But whiskey and bourbon is really the core value proposition. In terms of the size of the company, the company employs almost 5,000 employees, has about over $4 billion in sales. It's a proud member of SP 500 Dividend Aristocrats. To become a member of Dividend Aristocrats, a company has to pay and increase dividends for at least 20 to 25 years year after year. And then the company can become a part of that index. Sustainability is important, even though you may think alcohol and sustainability, is it compatible? But Brown-Forman does a lot in terms of sustainability in its value chain, sustainability in its production, sustainability also, and diversity and inclusion among its employees. Governance, this is probably something which is important for us here. The listing brought some discipline to Brown-Forman, but the soul of family ownership is still there. The family shareholders, well, it's a big family of about 120 family members, fourth to sixth generation right now. And there is a family shareholders committee, which also plays an important role, is a really intersection between the family and the business, because currently the CEO is not from the family, it's a non-family CEO, a long-term veteran that has spent decades in the company before. The chairman, there was recently, this year in June, there was a transition from one family chairman to the other family chairman. The board currently is half and half, so half is family, half is non-family. There is a lead non-family director, family chairman, non-family CEO, who is also part of the board. So a very balanced governance structure, for which we will hear it in a second. Brown-Forman is a little bit penalized in terms of ratings by proxy advisory companies. As a preparation for that discussion today, I had the pleasure to interview Matt Hamel, who is the Executive Vice President of Brown-Forman. He's a non-family member, but a very long employee of the company, and he's also a General Counsel. And I asked him a number of questions, and I would like to show you, first of all, a short corporate video of Brown-Forman, and then the interview with Matt Hamel. The whole video is about 12 minutes long, and I hope you all in the audience and you, Paul, will, find some interesting points to discuss further and some points to learn. So just sit down and enjoy.
Thanks, Marta.
When you live by your values, we can be the best.
We're pulling this line that's been on the Old Forester bottle since George Garvin Brown himself wrote it down.
It's a great American success story.
What I love about it is that it's applicable, of course, to our product, but it's applicable to everything we do.
This past generation has been incredible, growing this company in so many different ways. So I think it's now the responsibility of the next generation to take it even further.
You can't do any of that without the quality of the people.
Nothing better in the market is the easiest expression of the kind of people who work here.
It means that we always have to strive to be the best version of ourselves and not settle for less.
Nothing better in advertising, nothing better in distribution, nothing better in supply chain. It has such broad application that everybody feels a part of it.
We're at that point where we've done a lot of very good work. Now it's about saying we need to take it to another level.
How do we reduce our waste? How do we reduce our footprint? How do we improve utilization? How do you partner with your communities to help them become more sustainable?
If it's really going to be nothing better, then you have to declare it, you have to own it, you have to name it and claim it. And that's what we're doing.
It went public at 1933 was the end of Prohibition in the United States. The production and sale of beverage alcohol was again legal, and Brown-Forman needed to build a warehouse, so it went public to finance the construction of a warehouse, which today still stands and is used as an office building. The company issued non-voting B shares in 1959. The purpose at the time was to provide the family with an opportunity for liquidity so they could sell the B shares without relinquishing voting rights in the A shares. And it's important for the public markets because the float is so much greater than the A. Two-thirds of our issued and outstanding common stock is B, non-voting, but it trades very actively. 1/3 is A, but because so much of that is controlled by the family, it does not trade. It's very illiquid. Typically within a very small band of value, just a couple of percent difference. And it's not the case that the A trades at a premium to the B because it has votes. Most often the B trades at a premium to the A because it's liquid. And of course, a vote is not worth very much if the vote is controlled. It's important to say that the Brown family controls the A shares. They own a majority of those. I believe the publicly disclosed figure is close to 70%. In addition, they own enough of the B shares that their overall economic interest in the company is also more than 50%. And activists come at dual-class companies and say you ought to collapse them. It's very easy for us to say it's not worth the time and effort. It would be a waste of resources because the Brown family would still control. The Brown family shareholders are very, very knowledgeable about our business and are extremely well informed. Voters come proxy time. There's a Brown family shareholders committee that consists of Brown family members, of course, as well as the CEO of Brown-Forman. They meet 4 to 6 times a year, and in a way that is fully compliant with disclosure rules, Regulation FD in the United States, it's called. No investor can receive material non-public information that all investors don't receive. The CEO talks to them about our business. How are we doing? And they get to ask questions of him and our strategy. And it helps them to become better shareholders. Each branch owns its shares in different structures and in different ways. So how the stock passes from generation to generation varies by branch. Typical scenario would be that upon the death of a member of, say, 4th generation, the ownership of the stock would pass to the 5th generation, while the income interest in the stock would pass to the spouse of the deceased Brown family member. As the transition was being made in family leadership from the 4th generation to the 5th generation, the incoming presiding chair of the board at that time, Garvin Brown, he said, good governance is your best cousin. your literal cousin is not going to be able to necessarily to sit on this board. So have faith in our governance system that your investment is being well run. We typically have 6 or 7 independent directors and slightly fewer family directors, plus the CEO, who is not a family member, such that the independent directors constitute about half of the board at all times. Our governance structures get bad reviews from the proxy advisory firms. They don't like our dual class structure. They don't like the fact that the chair of the board is a family member and therefore not independent. The proxy advisory firms tend to apply a one-size-fits-all model. The governance model that we have organized over the years, the decades, suits us very well. There are other things that they don't like as well. These are things that are not negotiable for us. We're not going to change. And I would put our governance system up against any companies at all. Evidence of this comes from our annual shareholder meeting. Typically, directors will get 99% plus of the vote, although the family ownership is at around 70. Say on pay, we submit triennially, also, 98% plus approval. First of all, of course, being public, we're subject to all the rules around fiduciary duty. So all directors must act in the best interest of all stockholders. Family directors are not there to represent themselves or their branches or even their broader family. They represent all stockholders by law. If we look at our shareholder base, there are also, of course, institutional investors. Some of those are passive. So if you invest in a S&P 500 index or a dividend aristocrat index, you have to buy Brown-Forman B. There are, of course, institutional investors who are actively managed. Institutional investors have been in our stock for 10 and 12 and 15 years. They love it. While we're constantly being assessed, they don't sell. They stay in the stock. There will be small trades up and down, but if you look at the list of the top 10, it's very consistent over the decades. That, again, is a signal to us that we're doing something right in respect of the broader public shareholding community. There's a certain discipline to being publicly listed that helps you run a company. It is limiting, of course, in some ways if you're used to being an entrepreneur fast and loose. But in particular, when there's a large family and they're able to look up in the newspaper, well, nobody looks up in the newspaper anymore. When they're able to look up the value of their shares every day, it's helpful. It's helpful. One of our competitors, Bacardi, is also family controlled, but they're private. And the effect of that is that those family members have no way of knowing what that company is worth at any given moment. Public companies may have an easier time attracting and retaining very high caliber leadership, CEOs in particular. There are about 130 to 140 publicly listed family controlled companies in the United States. It's a smaller number and a smaller share of market capitalization in the United States than it is in Europe, for example. But it's significant nonetheless. We get together twice a year and we discuss matters of common interest. One recent topic was how, as general counsel for a company, to deal with controversial positions that family members take on social issues. And that could vary by how closely involved the relevant family member is in the company. But of course, the company has no control over the private activities of the family members. And so, whether it's Donald Trump or abortion rights or gun control or Black Lives Matter or any of the many controversial social issues in the United States at any given time, family members can have a point of view and may or may not comport with the point of view of the company, and even if it does, it could be expressed in a way that the company doesn't prefer. In the overwhelming number of cases, however, the families want to keep control through the generations, and so we spend a lot of time on succession planning. How do you bring along family members so they're prepared to run the company? How do you deal with a family member who aspires to run the company but isn't up to the task? How do you deal when you have more family members who are qualified than you can accommodate on the board? How do you deal with the ones who don't make it this time? How do you keep them engaged? There are a lot of issues around that. How do you help people in management who have to manage a family member? This is not a legal issue, but it's a very important issue for companies in our group. How do you communicate with a family in a way that complies with regulation FD without sharing with them material non-public information, and yet ensuring them that they're well informed about what's going on in the company? We never have a problem coming up with topics for our meetings. In between meetings, we have we email one another. How should I think about this? How should I think about that? I think we all find it a very useful, helpful network.
Paul, as you were listening to the video, I was also looking at you, and I saw a couple of interesting reactions. Sometimes enjoyment, sometimes maybe amusement. What caught your attention?
It's really interesting for me because I think the whole concept of listing on a stock exchange, family firms have fear of. There's a fear mentality around listing and giving, as you said, giving up control, maybe giving up ownership. And actually, I was just listening to him, and it made me smile, because all the things he's talking about is what family businesses talk about all the time, as in how you manage the next generation, the governance structure, the communication, managing the shareholder base, all the kind of commonalities that we always talk about. They're no different just because they're listed on a stock exchange, are they?
No, at least no. But what is different here is that he spoke about these subjects within the context of the publicly listed family-controlled companies network, right? He said there are about 130 to 140 such companies in the US. And as general counsel, or people who are responsible for some sort of a governance in those companies, this is what they discuss. In public companies, in private companies, you don't have probably people who are part of the company who would really take care of these subjects. This could be discussed in the family council or family governance, let's say, part of the governance overall, rather than by people, who are leading the governance function within the company, by payroll employees.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to listen to him. I mean, one of the quotes he said is, "Good governance is your best cousin." So all the things we talk about in best practice for family businesses, it's there, but with this extra layer of regulation in terms of financial reporting and duty. So it's almost the better of the best scenario, because you've got the best of everything, and they still have control, and they still have the retention of the ownership and the decision-making prowess. So they've turned it into a real success story for me.
Absolutely. I mean, the other arguments is that listing provides very easy way to exit for family members who don't want to be shareholders, and this is, at one point, as the shareholders base increases, you would always find family members who are less engaged, who have just other priorities, who just don't want to be kind of wealthy on paper, right? They want to be wealthy in reality because of other needs, right? Other lifestyle needs. And the problem is always, at what value shall they exit? And the valuation, at what value, at what valuation method, it takes sometimes generations, decades for the family to agree on. Here you don't have that problem. Of course, the other side of the coin is that it's so easy to exit that you have to put an extra effort to keep the family members really engaged, emotionally engaged.
So that for me was really fascinating, and the fact they talk about, he said it's the responsibility of the next generation to take it forward and to develop their own attitude to how they want to do things, and the conversation around sustainability, and it just goes to show that every business needs to take sustainability and the message of sustainability on board, because they can make a difference, be it through the supply chain or the customer base or the route to market, but the sustainability message came through loud and clear too. So all of the general concepts of business, this is a family control but publicly listed business, but they still have to have those conversations. So for me, it kind of, he said at the end, he said it's the discipline of being listed helps us in terms of the governance and the way we manage the family. So it's seen as a positive by him, and it's certainly not seen as a negative in terms of constraining the way they want to make their decisions or the way they want to do what they want to do. So I took lots of positives from his conversation and was actually quite surprised, which is why I think you saw me smile on screen, because I wasn't expecting it to be such a positive experience, and it clearly is for Brown-Forman.
I think, I'm fairly sure they also see the downsides, the dark sides. Yes, this is probably not the question I asked here, so maybe that's why the message didn't come so strongly across. But I don't think they would consider delisting, so they just make most of it, and they make most of it in a very, very smart way. So there is a certain rigor that listing brings. There are certain downsides, like being penalized for having a family chairman, or having dual classes of shares, but they say this comes at no question to us. We are not going to change. We think our governance is the best, and actually at the shareholders meetings we see that not only family shareholders but also the public shareholders vote for that governance. They vote for the directors and so on. So I think they really make most of it. Maybe one thing that relates to sustainability, and something that I'm aware of, is that especially the young generation of next generation family shareholders would always ask about sustainability. So during the shareholders meeting, many of the questions would be around sustainability. Many would be asked by the younger generation. And interesting enough, also on the family governance is the constitution. So they do all, the Brown-Forman has family constitution as part of the family governance. And constitution is really kind of revised every generation. And it is understood as a guiding kind of principles for the next generation. And every of the generation has to define its own way of being the shareholders. Again, taking into account the family controlled, let's say, derivatives or ways of acting, but at the same time, integrating those subjects which are, interesting for them as a generation. So sustainability, is definitely something that the next generation talks about and integrates in the family constitution.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think it's really interesting to hear a different perspective from someone as articulate as he was in terms of explaining their position. So really interesting insight there, and one that I will take away and I will share with some of the other prominent family firms that are listed, because I think it's a really great insight. So thank you for sharing that case study.
Wonderful. So let's travel to Israel. There is a fantastic example of what has been done there, and I had a chat with a professor in family business whose name is Nava Michel-Sabari. She is based at the University of Tel Aviv at the Raya Strauss Family Business Center, but she is not only the director of the center and the founder of the center, she's also part of the largest listed family business in Israel. And we're talking about Strauss Group, a food conglomerate, and she's a third generation, so she's really wearing two hats: a family third generation member and owner, and at the same time a researcher and a professor in the field of family business. And there is a fantastic thing that Nava and her center did in Israel. they introduced TA, it stands for Tel Aviv Family Index, which is an index of on a stock exchange that has about 45 companies right now. And it all came through this very strong belief that family businesses would outperform non-family businesses. So again, in a preparation of the discussion with you, Paul, I interviewed and recorded Nava, and I would like to share with you that presentation. So there is another video of about 10 minutes right now, and I'm really looking forward to your reaction, to your body language during the presentation.
I look forward to this.
Hi, my name is Nava Michael Zabari, and I'm from the Tel Aviv University. And I thank Marta for inviting me to tell the short story of the Tel Aviv Family Index. So I myself am third generation of a multinational food conglomerate, actually, by the name of Strauss, which is the family's name. So my grandparents, Dr. Richard and Hilde Strauss, came from Germany to Palestine in 1936. And you see them here becoming farmers, having cows, and a dairy and the food company was built from these foundations. Here you see the second generation, their son, Michael, my late uncle, passed away 2 years ago, and my mother. And we are 6 cousins on the third generation. And one of them, my cousin Ofra, is the chairperson of the family firm. And here you see the second generation, my mother and my uncle. And this is me. My mother decided to invest in the whole topic of learning about family business succession and governance. And on the photo on the right, you see myself with my mother, with my younger brother, one of them, and the lady who does our family office in the year 2000 in the FBN conference in London. So we went to different places to learn and to see what consulting and what knowledge has to offer. And I decided to finish a PhD, which I did at the Technion in Haifa, Israel's Institute for Technology. And I graduated 8 years ago as a young country. Interestingly, this is the first PhD on family firm as an academic topic. And when I finished, I asked my mother, you see her here with the president of the Tel Aviv University at the time, 2014, signing a donation to build the first research center focused on family firms in academia in Israel. So this is the Raya Strauss Center for Family Business Research, which I lead in the last 8 years. So again, you see me here with 3 other professors and 1 person from the Israeli Stock Exchange. And what we celebrate here, it's 4 years ago, 2018 in October, we persuaded the stock exchange to launch an index based on family firms. We told them, we showed them research of more than a decade documenting that especially larger family firms and publicly owned family firms financially outperform non-family firms. So we persuaded them and we launched the Tel Aviv Family Index. It includes today 45 publicly owned family firms in the stock exchange. And our center is responsible for the criteria. So our criteria for Israel is very, very strict, much more so than definitions of what a family firm is in research. So we demand in our criteria that at least 3 family members should be reported to the stock exchange as having family relationships. And in Israel, this has nothing to do with us. This is the regulation of the stock exchange is that nepotism should be reported. So any family relationships or connections between board members or important leading, like CEO, chairperson, or leading personnel in publicly owned firms needs to be reported. So it's relatively easy for us to follow family relationship among these firms. And we demanded at least 3 reported family members and at least 40% of family holdings for a family firm to be included in our index. And the reason is Tel Aviv and Israel is such a young country that with wider criteria, maybe 100 family firms would apply and be included, and we didn't want to have 100. We wanted it to be relatively restricted. So this is why this is the criteria. Now, when we launched it, or the stock exchange did, the reports in the newspapers were really critical, ridiculing this idea. They said it's an unworthy index, it's stupid, it's flawed, it has moral problems, and really harsh different criticism, saying there would be nothing in common in firms just because of family ownership, because people really couldn't get the idea of family firms being a distinct entity in comparison to non-family firms. And here you see the claim that there is resemblance between companies only because of family ownership is a joke. So this is 2018. And since then, I added here a title from a 2020 article, How We Missed the Rise of the Best Index in the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, because when you see here the comparison between leading indexes in the Israeli stock exchange, you see that our family index is the best with 90% of performance within these 4 years, and you see the other indexes, and it was even higher. But when the period is good and indexes go up, ours goes up even more than others, and when indexes go down or the stock exchange goes down, ours, I call it ours, as you see, goes down less. So here you see it in comparison to other leading indexes in the world, like NASDAQ and S&P 500 and Nikkei and others. So in any comparison, this is really a leading index. And you know, we are for sure glad that we could educate the Israeli public and people who read the newspaper and who invest in the stock exchange that in fact family ownership brings positive benefits to, in this case, publicly owned family firms, and there's nothing better than showing them these results, and no one can argue with them. So I feel that as a research center, bringing to Israel the information of what family ownership can contribute, or the benefits of it, we for sure do what our mission by founding the research center was at the beginning of 8 years ago. So thank you, Marta, for inviting me, and I hope this story contributes to your conversation. There is a similar index, which is the Credit Suisse one, which exists for a longer time and has also excellent performance. So we were aware of it and of all the research showing that publicly listed family firms excel and they outperform financially. So we had this data and we had this knowledge, and we had the contact to the stock exchange, and we came to them with this idea because we felt our mission is to educate all stakeholders. Israel is young. So, for example, my family holds, I think, about 60% of the publicly traded company. And in Israel, as a very, very young, 70 years of existence to Israel means that families here have a very, very high percentage of ownership, because it's before they get diluted and or sell part of their ownership. In Israel, it's about 50% family firms in the stock exchange. So the world average for family ownership in stock markets is about 30. So we are almost double in size. So we had to adjust the criteria to Israel. This is my answer. Our stock exchange has I think 80 different indexes. You have an index for real estate and an index for green reporting, an index for many ideas. So why not family ownership? Actually, it wasn't so difficult with the stock exchange because they love family firms, because they know, and my colleague, Dan Weiss, he had a study on the Israeli listed family firms in the stock exchange showing that they outperform. So we had some data also on the Israeli market. Family firms are more conservative. They are less eager to take in money from outside. They are very conservative on the economic side. They have a longer horizon. Their goals are for the next generations. And only the journalists were really, really critical. There is a joke that if a woman is pregnant and people don't believe, the only thing she has to do is wait. Because, what's the point in arguing? It was really 2 years and everybody knew it's the best index. So I think that overnight success after 2 years is outstanding. This is my answer. The stock exchange only has to agree to the idea, and to launch an index is not complicated. And when there's real solid reasoning behind it, like our case demonstrated, that I really think it will catch up. People who hear about it from other countries, I think will follow us. I hope so.
So that was Nava and the family Tel Aviv family business index.
That's fascinating, Marta. Again, lots of food for thought for me in terms of, she's obviously come from a very successful family business herself, and to use that knowledge in the way that she does her work. And I guess for me, the results are outstanding, and they've been, I think, echoed around the world in terms of the way that family firms outperform their non-family counterparts, be them listed or non-listed. I think it's a shame that they got the reaction they did, but I think it goes back to the whole, some of the myths we have to dispel around family firms in terms of that they're all small and non-performing and house lifestyle businesses. And we've clearly heard from you in terms of Pentland and Brown-Forman that's clearly not the case. We've got the Walmarts, the JCBs, the SC Johnson. There's loads of family firms around the world that demonstrate pure commitment. And I think the one thing I take away from this is that actually the index is another way for us to actually demonstrate the performance of family firms around the world and how well they perform, and use it in a positive way to actually celebrate family businesses and all they do. And then on top of that, all the good they do around the world through the jobs, the creation of wealth, and all the philanthropy. So I think she's inspirational and I love her story. I think the narrative's amazing. And to achieve something so quickly and the results are demonstrable, then you have to take your hat off to her and say, it's a job well done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, the ending note, inspiring others, and that she hopes that other countries will follow to also demonstrate what they have demonstrated, like a very solid data for family businesses outperforming non-family businesses. I mean, as a researcher, as an educator, I love it. I would love to be able to track data like that across the world. Because right now we kind of have some statistics, we have some knowledge. So we, for example, know that there are about 80 to 90% of all companies around the world are family businesses. We kind of estimated about 65% of the global GDP comes from is created by family businesses. The research has, however, not a clear answer to the question if family businesses outperform or not. So, for example, we know that in the times of, let's say, prosperity, family businesses may not outperform others, whereas in crisis situation, they actually would outperform others. So basically, the kind of the sinusoid is not so drastic, right? So, and I think it has something to do with long-term thinking and a patient capital, and basically the capacity not to overreact of family businesses. But again, Israeli example is different, because Nava said that in the prosperity times, family business index outperforms, and in the crisis situation, it outperforms anyhow, right?
Yeah. And I think the only thing I would take away from that is I think it's a really good source of information for us to base a conversation around on the performance of family businesses. I think there's the subtle conversational piece around what the purpose is, because not all family firms are there driven purely by a financial incentive. And their core purpose, yes, they need to make money to remain in a business for the long term, and they are often stewards for future generations. But sometimes their purpose isn't always financial. It's about doing good or being a good employer, promoting the community, and all the things they do as well, which can have a detrimental effect on the financial performance. So I think we have to take it in context sometimes in terms of what those businesses are doing outside of the scope of just financial performance. But either way, it adds to the mounting of information that's there to say that family firms are a force for good. And I think what we've heard today is that publicly listed family firms can be beneficial to the broader economic economy in terms of the performance, but also the families running them and giving them the structure and the governance and the tools to actually report their findings in a different way. So I think I think this afternoon, Marta, you've really helped to dispel some of the myths around listing, some of the benefits around doing it from a family perspective, and that the speakers have clearly amplified your voice. So I don't have any other questions for you. I just want to say thank you, because I wasn't expecting the depth of content to be so rich in terms of celebrating the public listed business or publicly listed family business sector quite so well. And I think you've positioned it in a way that will give a lot of food for thought to a lot of people.
I hope so. I hope so. And as I said, there are pluses and minuses. There are threats to some, there are opportunities to some others, but there are also very successful examples of publicly listed family-controlled companies that are actually kind of best in both worlds, right? They combine the best of the listed company and the best of the family ownership, let's say, spirit. So this is a beauty of working with family businesses. You know, there is no one-fit-all solution to family governance, to governance generally. So that means our jobs and our work will always be very, very, very interesting. No, because it all depends. Yes,
it does. And as we know, every family is different, and the generations, the type of business they're in, is all different. So it creates a fantastically rich world and a rich tapestry of businesses to talk about and to continue to support and champion. Marta, you've been amazing this afternoon. I know we've kept you up late in Singapore, but I really, really can't say how much we've appreciated your content today. So thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you very much, and I wish you a good afternoon and a good evening and a good day for
Thanks,
the
Mark.
audience. Thank
Thanks,
you for
Thanks, Marta. I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.